I've spoken to a number of police officers who say there was a level of sophistication to these bombs. So it wasn't just something he got out of a cookbook. It doesn't appear. Right. So again, I think it's a real issue as to who may have helped him in Jersey, New York, and/or a foreign component.
Congressman, the White House clearly doesn't see this as a war on terror. Josh Earnest, in an interview, said the following: in some ways, this is actually just a war of narratives. And so we want to make sure that we get our counter-narrative against ISIL, and we're having some progress. What do you make of that?
Absolutely ridiculous. It's foolish. And it does show, though, the whole mindset of the Obama administration. When you think in the past, whenever there's been a racial incident or something that seems to offend the president's own agenda, he's so quick to talk. Here, in this case, the attack was on Saturday night. The president said nothing about it on Saturday night. He said nothing about it on Sunday. Sunday, he was in Manhattan with the assistance of the NYPD that provided all sorts of security for him. He had to drive down through or around Chelsea to give a campaign speech in Gramercy Park at a big fundraiser where he attacked Donald Trump and never once even mentioned the attack in Chelsea. So to me, that is absolutely disgraceful. You know, George Bush was criticized for waiting 10 minutes before he responded to 9/11 because he wanted to get the full report. Here you have a president went almost 36 hours and was right in the neighborhood where the attack occurred and didn't say a word. I find that shameful.
Well, I'm just trying to figure, I mean, we were talking about that yesterday as well, Congressman. Why? Why is it so hard for President Obama to just admit that terrorism is alive and well, they want to kill us, we need to be vigilant, and yeah, it feels like Islamic terrorism. What's the problem?
Well, to use his term, it goes against his narrative, because he came into office so critical of the Bush administration and somehow convinced that if you reached out the hand of friendship, if you started to withdraw troops, if you were more conciliatory, if you were more respectful of quote-unquote human rights, that the enemy would respond. Instead, as John Brennan, his own CIA director, said just 2 months ago, the terror threats now are worse than they were back on 9/11 or 9/12. Yeah. So this has been his administration has been a failure. I think he's in denial, and he doesn't want to admit it.
I guess it would also put into question, Morgan Ortagus, the idea of his plans to close down Guantanamo Bay.
That's an excellent point, Maria. I mean, we've seen with the Fort Hood shootings that was called workplace violence, and it appears that we're treating this gentleman, this terrorist, not a gentleman, as someone, a common criminal, charging him with attempted murder and gun charges. Congressman, why aren't we treating him as an enemy combatant, especially after what you just said, that he doesn't appear to be cooperating with the authorities? Why is he just being treated like a common criminal?
Yeah, I was listening to Ed Davis on your show earlier before, and again, I have the same issues, that Ed raised, that in Boston, the Justice Department did tell him, as I understood, did tell the local police not to read the Miranda rights, to get as much information as possible. Then, by the way, that was overridden later on, and the Justice Department did stop the FBI from carrying out a full interrogation in Boston. But at least for a while, they were just having open questions, and you can do it under the law. I don't know why that happened. I really don't, and that's something which, to me, is a real question for the Justice Department.
Congressman, what steps would you recommend to the next administration to correct these problems that you see?
Well, first of all, stop being politically correct. Identify the enemy as Islamist terrorism. Make it clear that increased surveillance is necessary in the Muslim communities, because that's where the threat is coming from. Stop apologizing. Stop with this crazy quote-unquote narrative that Hillary Clinton has, that somehow if you attack Islamist terrorism, if you speak out against it, that somehow you're recruiting. Listen, nobody's recruiting anyone. They recruit themselves. Bill Clinton, again, I'm not an enemy of Bill Clinton by any means, but the 9/11 attacks came after 8 years that Bill Clinton was in office, and the only time he used troops was to help Muslims. He helped them in Kosovo. He helped them in Bosnia. And no one was provoking Muslims then, and yet we were attacked on 9/11, and we've been attacked ever since. They don't need any provocation. What they do respect is force, and what they do respect is coming after them, and that's what we have to do, and stop apologizing for it.
So look forward for us today. The president is in New York. President Obama is aiming to define his leadership globally. In his final United Nations speech today, we're going to hear from the president. He's also going to talk about refugees. That's one of the big issues on the table at the UN General Assembly. What kind of legacy is Obama leaving?
Well, as far as terrorism, I think it's been, at best, it's been mixed. Overall, it's been a failure. Certainly with ISIS, it's been a failure. It's been a terrible failure for the last several years. And again, there are more threats now than there were on 9/11. That speaks for itself. As far as refugees, it sounds good. It sounds very humane to be letting in refugees. And, you and I, Maria, we're descendants of immigrants. We're proud of it. But the reality is that the Syrian immigrants coming in, there is no way to vet them at all. And we know that ISIS is going to attempt to infiltrate those refugees with terrorists. This is absolute madness for us to be allowing these people into the country at this time. There are no records. There's nothing to vet them against. Yeah. We don't know who's coming in. And to me, it's just, it's a feel-good, but it's going to be very dangerous for the U.S.
But the president has been very clear, right, Dagan? He wants to increase the number of refugees coming into this country. And Hillary said she wants to increase the number by 500%.
Right. So we took in roughly 10,000 in the last year. I think the number that she threw out was 65,000 was kind of a target. And going back to something I mentioned earlier in the show, Congressman, we still have loopholes that let people overstay their visas in this country. 5 of the hijackers on 9/11 had overstayed their visas, and to this day we have still not closed those loopholes. To this day we do not track tourist entry and exit out of this country. We're still waiting, and it's 2 years out at America's airports.
Yeah, I would say probably half of the illegal immigrants in this country, if there's 11 million, probably 5 million of them are people who came into this country legally and have overstayed their visas. For whatever reason, the technology has not been perfected. I don't know why. To me, there should be no excuse. This goes back to the 9/11 Commission. Their report back in 2004 said this had to be perfected. This loophole had to be closed immediately, and that was 12 years ago. And we're not much further along now than we were then.
Yeah. So real quick, Congressman, how do you make sure that the vetting process gets better?
Right now, I say suspend it. Just end it. I don't see how you make it better because there's no records. You're talking about refugees coming from Syria where we have no access to any records. We don't know who these people are. They can say they're anyone. They can say they're John Smith. Yeah. We're not even certain they're from Syria. I mean, it's just too risky a move to take.
Congressman, we will be watching. We so appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Maria.
Congressman Peter King joining us there. Kevin.